This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Bagman.
Who wants to be outside when it's cold and snowing and blustery? Nobody that I know. And no animal either. We go inside outdoors this week to talk about both. Critters that want to make your home their home for winter's cold. And two, making the world a better place when winter is at its worst. Josh James is a nuisance wildlife control operator in addition to his full-time job of driving a snow plow. It's all next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
It's time to register for Kentucky's elk hunts. This is Tim Farmer. The Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website is Elk Central and the only place to enter this year's draw. Elk hunting in Old Kentucky. Take it from me, there's nothing like it. 1,000 names will be drawn, and with the Pick 2 option, you gotta like your odds. The deadline is midnight, April 30th. The Kentucky Elk Draw. Enter at fw.ky.gov. Again, fw.ky.gov.
Charlie Bagman in on Kentucky Afield Radio. I think we have all had visitors to our garage, our barn, our basement, our attic, in the form of wildlife. My guest today, Josh James, he's from Oldham County, Kentucky, is what we call a nuisance wildlife control operator, a critter getter. He also has this little side job that he has with the Department of Highways here in Kentucky of keeping the roadways a little better place when it is blustery outside and blizzards are a-comin'. Now, Josh, I know you like plowing snow, but what else?
I'd rather be running my trap line. Really, if the temperature's not as cold as it's been. Most of them little critters don't like to move when it's real cold outside and snow on the ground, so...
This time of year, people will call on you to say, Josh, I have something living in my attic or my garage. What type of animals do you hear about this time of year?
It's actually mostly coons. Getting into people's houses in their crawl spaces or getting somehow up into their roof in their insulation or getting in their trash cans. It's a irritation to most people, but it's mainly coons.
In my neighborhood, I have a drain pipe. If water collects in your backyard and it goes down this long, deep pipe into the ground, and that's where I find critters coming in and out of more times than not, and most times it is raccoons.
Especially mink. I mean, a mink really loves to run through them little culverts and little pipes, and coons do that too. They're going up in there searching for food, searching for anything. They love to explore and love to just find things, and play with things. They got like hands like a human almost.
So I'm trying to think of the critters that would give you problems in winter time.
I tell you, and it's not just winter time, but probably one of the biggest problems people have are beaver. Beaver getting into their ponds or their lakes that they have lots of nice trees around and stuff like that, and also muskrats. But the beaver are going in there and they can chop down a fully mature tree in a matter of, hours or even a day, depending on how big it is. And the muskrats, they dig, they're super diggers and they love to dig through your dam. So then you got a leaking pond, and that's actually, beaver's probably the main thing that people call us about. Beaver and muskrat, just for the sheer fact of how bad it makes their place look and how destructive they are.
Are beavers prevalent in your part of the country?
Oh, yes.
Your part of the state. I think of beavers. I think western Kentucky and the lowlands and maybe the Henderson Sloughs area. But are they statewide?
Yes. And especially, I tell you, they are really heavy around areas on the Kentucky, or the Little Kentucky River and the Kentucky River. I know around Lockport and Port Royal or Drennan areas or anything in them low spots, when the river comes up, you've got, sloughs that form in these people's fields, and they stay wet, usually throughout the year. And these beaver, and they'll come up in there and just destroy things. I mean, it's crazy how much the amount of wildlife is in the river. Beaver, otter, muskrat, they're very prevalent up here.
So what kind of hours do you have to keep taking care of people's nuisance wildlife?
You do it, you set your traps during the day, and every 24 hours you're required to check the trap, and if there's an animal in it, dispatch it. Or if you're catching it in a live trap, release it out of the live trap now. And you can't release it just anywhere. There are certain places you have to, it's got to be so big acres-wise.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Are you moving the problem from point A to point B?
Well, no, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people ask us, well, can you not kill the beaver or whatever when you trap it? Well, the problem with that is most people aren't going to let you bring a beaver and let it loose on their property because they know how destructive they are. No.
So if you trap a beaver, where do you take this beaver?
Well, we usually dispatch them. Actually, I don't think we have ever released a live beaver. I know some people do, but we always dispatch them. Do
nuisance wildlife control operators need to abide by the regulations in place? How does that work? How do they differ?
A nuisance wildlife control operator can trap throughout the year. If you don't have that license or the permit, you have a season, which I believe it started November 15th this year, and I think it ends the 28th of February. And that's usually when you want to catch them for their hides.
The winter's when that hide and fur is at its thickest.
Yes, and especially, your water animals, beaver, muskrat, otter, they get really, really thick hides, and they get a lot of guard hairs on them. And I've always been told throughout, like at the beginning of trapping season, usually a water animal usually has like a lighter colored coat to it, and it's a sign usually of an earlier catch. A darker animal is usually a sign of a later catch with more guard hairs, the real long hairs that stick up on the hide.
If we're talking about nuisance wildlife in the wintertime, then I'm going to think that come middle of fall or late fall, when a critter knows it's getting cold, that it's going to start looking for a place to den or call home. That's going to include more than just beaver and mink and raccoons, muskrat. There may be a few snakes in the mix, bats. Do you see a more variety of calls for your services in fall than you would, say, in January, February?
It's usually about the same. A lot of people they want the stuff gotten rid of usually during the warmer seasons because they can see the damage. You got these beautiful green trees, or when the weather gets cold, like I said earlier, a lot of things don't move. So in the summertime, a lot of people really see things a lot more because the animals are more mobile and more active. Now, we get a lot of, coyotes and fox, calls like that during the wintertime when it's real cold, just because the predators, they're always moving. They're always searching for food.
How about skunks?
Well, they're doing the same thing that all your muskrats and your beaver and your coos and everything else are doing. They're running around searching for food and shelter. Especially when it gets cold, they have to. Like right now, there's not a real wide supply of food, so stuff has to move to find food.
There was a time when I had a whole family, it seemed, of raccoons who would come and visit my porch every night, and you couldn't let up. You couldn't persuade them to not come. I don't know what it was they were smelling. Maybe it was a hamburger on the grill, even though this was hours later, and they would still come. And I took it upon myself to get a cage that would live trap the raccoon. And I'm not far from a creek, and I would drive it a few miles down to the creek and turn it loose. And I thought, well, okay, I have 3 raccoons. I caught 3 raccoons. I released 3 raccoons. The next night, there was another raccoon and another. So there must have been 50 out there. But I got to thinking, I could very well wind up not catching a raccoon the next time I went and checked the trap, but instead there might be a skunk in there.
If you don't know what you have in there or you don't understand it, your chances of getting bit or scratched or getting any sort of diseases, and they have a lot of diseases that they carry, and especially rabies. I know coons, and I'd say skunks too, are really, really prevalent. My advice would get somebody that knows a little bit about them to try and help you out with it.
That's good advice. Josh, hang with us. We've got to take a break. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Bagman back on Kentucky Afield Radio. I'm glad you've joined us today. I'm talking to Joshua James, who works for the Kentucky Department of Highways. He is a snowplow operator, but also in his spare time he has a job, he and his brother, as nuisance wildlife control operators. That means you got something living in your attic, he comes and gets it. What area do you serve, Josh?
We serve Oldham County, Henry County, Trimble County. We would probably go to Carroll County, depending on the job, and Shelby County.
I've heard you say we a few times now.
Me and my brother actually have our own little nuisance wildlife removal business. His name's Bradley. But yeah, we've been into trapping for, it's been probably about 7 or 8 years now, but we go hand in hand with it.
So someone listening in Somerset, Bowling Green, Benton, Kentucky, anywhere else, Madisonville, for example, and they have a problem, where do they look in the phone book for someone like you?
We are not listed in the phone book. Actually, the best way you can get a hold of somebody in your area is getting on Kentucky Fish and Wildlife's website, and you can actually search for nuisance wildlife control operators and where they will come to solve your problem. And that's actually where almost every single one of them have come from the Fish and Wildlife, where people have either called them, asked and say, hey, I have a problem with beaver, or coons getting in my attic or my crawl space, and they'll tell you the people that are in your area that are licensed to do it.
Well, that sounds like an interesting job you have, but it has to keep you busy. You work a full 40-hour week with the Department of Highways. How many hours do you think that you would spend beyond that in wildlife control?
When you get off work at 4 o'clock, you're going to be way past dark usually, checking traps. There's a lot of time involved.
It's a job that has to be done, isn't it?
It is.
Talking about jobs that need to be done, wildlife control is one of those. But you also have a job with the Department of Highways that to me is interesting. In fact, I'll hold you out, Joshua James, as one of my heroes. You're one of the dudes that go out and plow the roads when there's ice and snow.
Right.
Tell me what that job is like.
I tell you, it's a lot of driving. It's a lot of mental stress. I mean, especially you got on my truck, I just drive a single axle dump truck, but I've got an 11-foot plow on the front of it, especially when cars are coming. Is that what
I would see on an interstate or a city street?
This would be a city street. I actually run the Westport side here in Oldham County, like the Riverside, Westport, 42, Old Sligo, and Fort Pickens, which are pretty narrow roads, especially down in Westport. So now on the interstate, you'd see like a tandem dump truck, a full-size dump truck with a 12-foot plow on it, and that's a lot of plow.
What is your proper term in terms of plowing the snow? What's that called?
Well, snow and ice removal is what they call it here. Plow truck driver.
I've made a list here. You're like a fireman when someone's house is ablaze. You're like a paramedic in a wreck, an emergency room, doctor, the police at a crime scene. You are loved by all. I mean, when there is a blizzard, there is nobody wants to see more than you.
Than a snowplow truck.
Doing your job, and that's got to be a moving target because you're out there plowing as the snow is coming down. Chances are you're going to have to go back and do that road again and maybe a third time, right?
Oh, yeah. Say if the snow is coming down pretty steady and the temperature is below like 15, you're going to have to go over that route several times, even with calcium chloride on the salt, spreading 500 pounds of salt per road mile. To tell you another thing, when you're plowing and everything, you know, a lot of people, they wonder, well, why are, you know, this road clean and this road's not? Well, like on 42 especially, it gets so much traffic on it, it just packs the stuff down into ice, like concrete. And you can't even get a plow blade underneath it, so you have to just keep on going down it and keep on salting it. Hopefully you can get some sun on it during, you know, when the morning comes to help burn the stuff off.
I'm trying to put myself on a snowy road at night, and I see you either ahead of me or I see you coming. This is something that people just don't inherently know. Do they need to stay behind you? Do they need to pass you? What are the rules of thumb?
You know, if you see a truck, you know, give it some space, you know, 100 or 200 feet, especially if it's throwing salt, because when it throws it, it hits the ground and it's going to bounce. You know, you get it all up in your car. Don't try and pass the truck. If you got to be somewhere, leave earlier. Don't try and pass them, and if you see one coming to you, slow down if you can and just pull over to the side. Because, you know, some of these trucks, they've got so much plow on the front of them, and you don't have much room for error, especially on these back roads. The weight of that plow on there throws you around, especially when you got that plow on the ground. It pulls you. It pulls you from left to right. You're constantly battling it. So, I mean, if people can give you just a little bit of space, if they see you, you know, pull over if they're coming at you. That's what I always appreciate, somebody that just takes the time just to pull over a little bit so I don't have to try and stop and I can just keep on rolling.
So what is it that goes through your mind when somebody says, I'm going to pass you, and then they floor it on ice or not, but they get up to speed and they just zip right on by? What are you thinking?
If the plow trucks are out there, you know, and that truck's got a lot of weight on it, so I can usually go pretty much anywhere without spinning or not being able to make it. Well, especially when it gets a lot of snow on it and the temperature drops, you know, that plow truck will slide. You know, and when you give it in a little car that's got no weight on it, or even a pickup truck, when you give it gas, you try and go around them, and then you try and slow back down a little bit, and you hit your brakes, and then you're in the ditch. And that's usually what happens. When people pass you, usually probably a mile up the road, they're usually in the ditch.
So here's an obvious question. Who plows the road for you to get to your truck? Nobody does that, do they?
We're usually here before it happens.
How does your workday take place? Do you look at the forecast and say 3 to 5 inches of snow are coming? What does that trigger you to do?
We have 2 crews. One comes in at midnight and will work through 4 the next day. They'll work their normal 8 from 7:30 to 4, and then they'll work from 12 to 7:30 to get another 8. So it puts you at 16 by the time you're all done. And then usually if they say something's going to be coming in after we're supposed to leave work, they'll usually hold the first crew until midnight. So usually we're ahead of it all the time.
Sounds like a lot of overtime.
It's a lot of overtime.
And I don't think anybody out there minds a bit that you're out there, and they just, when they see you, they feel like the world is a little better place.
Oh, yeah.
It would have to. Even before you did this, you had to have that same feeling.
Oh, yeah. When the roads were just terrible, I mean, as long as you seen one out there trying to do something, you know, it made you feel a lot better.
This isn't just the Kentucky Department of Highways that's doing this. Are there not county services, private contractors, it could be cities that also have trucks, albeit them smaller, that are also out there trying to help the situation?
Yes. I mean, we have a county road department here. They have several trucks. We have 7 contractor trucks that actually come into our barn. If they think that it's going to be bad enough that just our trucks alone can't handle it, they'll call outside drivers, you know, that have other jobs to say, hey, you come get in the snowplow truck and help these state guys out. Now, as far as like county and stuff, they pretty much stay on county roads. Sometimes occasionally, if it's bad enough, you'll see a county or a city truck helping you out. usually if you're not in the city limits or if you're on a state highway, it's usually the state with state contracted trucks helping.
What's in the cockpit of your truck when you get in there that's different from, say, your pickup truck?
Well, I drive, I think it's about a 2000 model GMC single axle. If you know anything about like a standard duty Chevy truck of like the late 90s, that's basically what it looks like inside. You get in there and you've got 3 levers that are hydraulic, and then you have a salt spreader box. There's no GPS, no cameras. It's what you see. Your eyes are what you see. But you got one lever that runs your bed up and down, one lever that raises your plow up and down, and one lever that runs it left and right.
Is it possible to have enough coffee with you when you start your shift to go for hours on end?
No.
Can't be done.
You can usually drink 1 cup of coffee before you get in there, but you can't drink it while you're in there. They're manual. You have to try and shift the gear and run your plow and your salt box. So your hands are pretty tied up in these trucks.
Josh, this is a fascinating subject. We could talk for the rest of the hour, but we can't. We are out of time. But you are definitely one of my heroes, and I appreciate the work you do, hands down. Josh James with the Department of Highways, snowplow driver, and nuisance wildlife control expert. My name is Charlie Baglin. You are tuned in to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. How well do you know the people you work with? In all likelihood, you know them as nice people, competent people. Everybody has a story. And coming up after our fishing report, we will give you just one very fine example. Also, I encourage you to join us on Facebook. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box. If you just put Kentucky Afield, it'll automatically come up the TV show, which is well and good. But if you put in radio as well, then you'll be able to like our page too, like us, and you'll like us. Time now for our fishing report.
At Kentucky and Barkley Lakes, I'm thinking about springtime fishing already because the lake's been frozen over, but now it's starting to thaw out. Weather's starting to warm up. So I'm thinking about getting out on the lake and going fishing. One thing I need to be aware of right now is because we've had a lot of ice, is floating ice. It's still kind of dangerous out there as these big sheets of ice break up and are floating around, so be careful when you're running. Well, with crappie fishing, I'm thinking deep right now, 15 to 20 feet along the ledges. The crappie are suspended out there. I'm going to be fishing a jig, maybe a jig tipped with a minnow, looking for maybe some deep water brush piles. Bass fishing, again, I'm going to go back out to deep water ledges, humps, also bass that are suspended out there in that deeper water. Right now is a good time to think about white bass. White bass are running up in the creeks like Little River, Eddy Creek, Blood River, Jonathan Creek. Well, this is Paul Reister, and I hope you find a good day to go fishing.
Hi, this is John Williams with the Fish Report for Southeast Kentucky. For those anglers willing to brave the cold weather, rainbow trout are going to be stocked in several of our area lakes, including our Finns Lake, the Brickyard Ponds over in Knox County, also in Cedar Creek Lake, Cannon Creek Lake, and Wood Creek Lake during the month of February. As always, those can be caught on small inline spinners and usually bite readily during the winter months. Also in the district, walleye should be making the spawning run up the major tributaries, especially on Lake Cumberland. You can find them in the South Fork or the Cumberland River below Cumberland Falls, or stacking up below Wolf Creek Dam. They're below Lake Cumberland. Good baits for those are jigs and minnows. Drifting kind of in the seams there, should be able to pick up a few fish that way. As always, good luck and be safe.
This is Rob Rold in the Northwestern Fishery District. No land is about 8 feet above winter pool. It's falling somewhere around half a foot a day, and rough is right at winter pool. At Nolin River Lake, anglers have been doing a little spider rigging along the channel there, catching crappie at around 8 feet deep. At rough, they're catching crappie at about 2 feet deep. Lake Malone and our smaller impoundments are for the most part frozen over. Although frozen over now, we're hoping by this Friday the 21st, our Finns Lakes and Peabody Trout Lakes will be thawed out enough to stock. And that will be the 3 trout lakes on Peabody Wildlife Management Area, as well as our Finns Lake in Madisonville, which is the Madisonville City Park Lake. The Owensboro Finns Lakes will not be stocked until probably around the first week of March. That's an update from the Northwestern Fishery District. Please remember to be safe on the water.
Charlie Bagman back on Kentucky Afield Radio. How well do you know the people you work with? Something that makes you go, More after the break.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
It's Charlie Baglan back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Radio can take many forms. There's a term in radio, it's called long form. When I did this program many years ago, it was a 5-minute show. But every now and then, I would just take the absolute raw show that I was editing down to 5 minutes, and it may wind up being 7 minutes or 10 or whatever it was. And I would just keep that longer version, the long-form version of the show, and put it on the web as well for anybody else that wanted to hear what wound up on the cutting room floor. Now, I want you to hear this. It talks a lot about the good we find in people who find good in nature.
The sky is the limit, and we are cleared for takeoff. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio. How well do you know the people in your everyday life? Neighbors, co-workers. It can be surprising. In the business of being a reporter for Kentucky Afield, I've had to delve into the life and life's work of some of my fellow employees. One man lived on an island in Lake Superior, where he studied wolves. Another repelled cliff lines in western Wyoming to research falcons. I crossed paths once with a forestry student from Vietnam, where protections for wildlife and wild places as we know them were non-existent. Whether you're probing for a story or just being inquisitive in conversation, there's always a line where you know to stop. Such had been the case with a program and a program leader called CARE, Kentucky Aquatic Resources Education, Aquatic Ed for short, sort of a feel-good program that teaches kids to fish and the value of water quality. Aquatic Ed was centered for 15 years by a nice fella who used to be in the Air Force. And of the countless interviews I've conducted with Colonel Lonnie Nelson, I never strayed toward his war chest. He announced his retirement in the fall of 2005. And at the very end of our very last interview, conducted on a very different subject, curiosity got the better of me.
I had 2 childhood dreams of what I wanted to do with my life. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and when I was a very young boy, a returnee from the Korean War flew a P-51 over our farm every Thursday morning, and I dreamed about flying every day. I was 7 years old. Had the opportunity to go to the Air Force and learn how to fly, and I took it. On a farm, my recreation was hunting and fishing, and that was my other dream, to have an occupation of working with fishing and hunting.
What kid hasn't dreamed of flying a plane? But pursuit of a dream in aviation led Kentucky's coordinator of children's fishing programs to begin to tell me a story that brought out the kid in me. Global travel, cultures, a life where everything was high-tech. You begin to see life differently when you see life from the cockpit of an AWACS aircraft.
The Amazon. I flew across the Amazon for an hour. Now, you have to realize how immense the Amazon River is. That is an ecosystem that just continues and continues. And I was flying not from mouth to headwaters. I was flying directly across, and it was over 400 miles wide. And it was all like virgin territory. You didn't see cities. You didn't see anything down there except an occasional light, an occasional some human visitation. But I was in awe of the Amazon River.
My friend Lonnie spent 21 years in the Air Force beginning in 1968, and 18 of those years were spent in the air. As a pilot, he flew tactical and technical missions in combat and for military research. He was an aircraft commander, an instructor pilot, and every day was different.
Taking off in Alaska and flying a 9-hour mission and never seeing a light. There was no human habitation. flew 2 or 3 missions around and about the North Pole, flew 5 or 6 missions chasing the Aurora Borealis. Funnest mission I ever had in my life, flying to find the northern lights and fly as close to them as I could. The purpose of the mission had to do with what those phenomena were doing to the communications capability we had.
Chasing the northern lights in a plane for hours. My wildest imagination is no match for my friend's real life. But it doesn't have to be. I'm glad the world has people like him who can draw upon incredible experiences when teaching the simplest things. After the Air Force, Colonel Nelson could have gone to the commercial airlines, but instead...
I had a son that was 6 and a son that was 4, and I was very concerned with being their father and teaching them the things that I felt were important to me. I got involved with their youth activities and saw that I had a skill of helping other young kids. What I wanted to do was to educate kids about the natural world. When I came to work in Kentucky, they had the ideal job open for what I had done in graduate school. And it was just coincidence of timing, I suppose.
The Aquatic Ed program reaches about 30,000 kids each year, with annual events established in every Kentucky county. For some youngsters, their earliest memory includes Lonnie.
Since I can first remember. I'm 13 now.
Hawk Mangan was a student at age 3.
Yeah, he took me on my first creek expedition. We found hellgamites and darters. Then we went to the hatchery ponds, and I caught a catfish as big as I was back then.
We certainly want to involve the whole family in any education that we do.
Mark Johnson now heads the Kentucky Aquatic Ed program.
That gets back to a loss of part of a way of life that involved providing for ourselves by going out and bringing home a fish. Anytime that part of our history or our heritage is lost, you can't replace it. And fishing is one of those ways that we can stay connected to the environment and to our history.
For Lonnie, fishing was worth knowing in itself, but it was a means to learn so much more. Here's an excerpt from a kids' fishing field trip from 2002. What is the lesson there that's being taught in fishing?
There's several lessons. There's the lesson you see here right now, Charlie. You see children helping each other. These are children that maybe every day don't help each other in school, but when they come fishing, they will. That's one lesson. The geese are paired off. You see one out there on the goosebox nest. Lots of valuable lessons here about the wildlife that we have throughout the state.
273 combat missions and nearly 5,000 air hours weren't enough to separate Lonnie from the officer he became and the kid he was at age 7. In fact, he says it just made him appreciate the world and the great outdoors all the more.
To realize that there are literally billions of people. They are living in an environment that is non-existent in the United States. You have to understand that there is nobody in the United States living at the level that some of these people are living at in other countries. To realize how lucky I was that I was only going to be there for a year in Vietnam. I was only going to be there for a few months. I was only going to be there for a few weeks. And I got to go home to an apartment, or I got to go home to my house, my family, and I didn't have to exist in that environment the rest of my life like they did. I lived in Germany. At that time, it was West Germany. It was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. West Germany is a country approximately the size of Kansas. They had 64 million people. We, at some point in time, in the United States, may reach a population density like they have in Europe. When we do, that's going to have a tremendous effect on our forests, on our rivers. Again, I'm fortunate to be able to return to the United States. I'm blessed.
So what does a hero look like? Well, look in the mirror, or look at the person next to you.
I think the biggest difference that I've made, Charlie, is that there are several 100,000 children that have gone fishing and had relationships with their parents and with mentors and with new friends that they may not have had the opportunity for.
Maybe others I work with knew these stories. But for the man who had sat down behind my microphone to talk about fall fishing, it was instead I who went fishing, and what I caught spoke volumes.
It opened my eyes to the remarkable people we all work with wherever we are, whoever we are. Every page of experience that we have dog-eared along the way just strengthens the fabric. Aquatic Ed is now a cornerstone of what the Department of Fish and Wildlife teaches to parents and children statewide. And in this time of holiday joy and thoughts of what's to come, I offer this story as a salute to what we've had. To learn more about how Aquatic Ed can make a real splash in a kid's life, log on to fw.ky.gov.
That was a good interview. I like Lonnie Nelson. I miss Lonnie Nelson. I'm glad Mark Johnson is in this place. You take a look around, it's amazing that the people you work with, and if you only knew their story. Everybody's got one. I guess that means I have one. I know my mother had one. She was a single parent. I had the benefit of my grandfather. I had a cousin who was a few years older than I was. We would fish, we would camp. I'm sure my mama would have done it. She just really didn't know how. And that's sort of the case with a lot of women these days, that the outdoors is seemingly a place where guys do stuff. It's a man's world out there. And if a woman wants to be a part of it, well, she is going to have to learn from a guy somewhere, more than likely. And there is a program out there, and it's been around for, I want to say, more than 20 years or so, called the Becoming an Outdoorswoman program. It is coming back on April 5th for a special one-day session over in Grayson, Kentucky. But if you are a woman interested in learning basic outdoor skills in a comfortable, friendly environment where there's no fear of attitude or anybody talking down to you, where you can learn and have fun, you can register online at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife website. Nature, how to shoot a gun, how to shoot a bow. And you get to learn from seasoned professionals. Tree identification, hunting, fishing, bird identification, wild game cooking, edible plants, archery, shooting, and some more. Plus the friends you meet, because you're like-minded. Yeah, I've wanted to learn this. Now, I have somebody I can do it with that's my same sex. I don't always have to do it with my brother, my husband, or boyfriend. It's right there on the shore of Grayson Lake, Carter County, eastern Kentucky. I encourage you to take a look, find out more at the Fish and Wildlife website. It's fw.ky.gov. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Baglin back in our final segment. We have a good dog story coming up. It's about a basset hound. First, I want to bring up the subject of income taxes. I've not done mine yet, but I do have an appointment. And while I'm there, I know the subject of tax checkoffs is going to come up. I will see to it that it does. What a tax checkoff is, it's an optional, kind of a voluntary means to contribute to some select worthy funds, one or all of them, if you're getting a refund. The one that we're partial to around here, and you've heard advertised here on the show, is called the Kentucky Nature and Wildlife Fund. Here's more about that.
The Natural Tax Shelter, next on Kentucky Afield Radio. That magical day is fast approaching, April 15th. Complaining about our taxes is some of the easiest complaining we do. The tax issue facing most of us is filing our income tax. While that may not have many people singing, it's a process that can at least end on a good note. Here's how. On the back of our Kentucky individual income tax forms, we find something called tax checkoffs. It's where you can voluntarily support 4 special funds. They are the Veterans Program Trust Fund, the Bluegrass State Games and U.S. Olympic Committee, the Child Victims Trust Fund, and heading the list
is the Nature and Wildlife Fund.
We can only use the funds for two things. One is either buying land for a nature preserve or managing the preserve.
Don Dott is Executive Director of the Kentucky State Nature Preserves Commission. Nature preserves, along with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, share equally the proceeds of the Nature and Wildlife Checkoff. There are 44 nature preserves across Kentucky, covering 18,000 acres.
When we create a state nature preserve and we buy that first tract of property, that's not the end of the story. There's always additional tracts that we need for a preserve, and it takes a long period of time to create one and put all the pieces together.
From the perspective of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, we've used it exclusively for our wildlife diversity programs.
Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife biologist Danny Watson.
We see bald eagles nesting in Kentucky more than ever before. Same with ospreys. Otters are doing well in the state, as well as peregrine falcon restoration project. Those are some of the more high-profile projects that we've dealt with over the years, and it has helped to address the needs of some of these species of special concern.
The math is simple. Donating to a tax checkoff reduces the amount of your refund by the amount contributed. Every year, 1.8 to 1.9 million of us receive a tax refund. 18 to 19,000 make a checkoff contribution. That's a meager 1.2%. Obviously, for the other 99%, the tax checkoff section is a good place to enter a few quick zeros and plow straight to the good part. How much will you get back? That's fine if you want to maximize your return. However, Danny and Don believe that just like the credit card commercial, the return that you get with the wild outdoors is priceless.
Particularly, we aim for rare species. One is Short's goldenrod that's found up around Blue Licks State Park. That plant is only known from roughly a 2 square mile area there at the park and nearby, and was recently found in one location in southern Indiana. Those are the only known populations of that plant in the world. The plant may never be anything more than a pretty wildflower, or it might be found to have some medicinal purpose or food purpose at some point.
If you're a Kentuckian, odds are you have a genuine interest in the fish, wildlife, plants, and lands that share the world with us, despite the fact that until you lace up a sturdy pair of hiking boots, these are critters and places you may never see.
We can take a look at trends, bird feeding, watching wildlife in the backyard, people actually taking the time to schedule a vacation, to travel to a specific area to view wildlife. Those types of recreation activities have increased dramatically over the last 20 years because opportunities have increased.
These are areas, the nature preserves in Kentucky, that are the best remaining remnants of habitat that existed when the pioneers came into Kentucky. And they have to be protected at this point, and they have to be managed to keep them in that state.
The taxman and his reputation are neither dear to our hearts nor our wallets, and George Harrison's song doesn't help. But then, early on, the taxman didn't envision tax checkoffs. Instead of money falling into one big pot, a checkoff lets us target programs both you and your tax dollars support. Don and Danny know what safeguarding plants, animals, and pretty places around the state mean to people around the state. Something we all need to keep in mind whether it's tax season or not.
Charlie Bagman back, and as you know, I do like dogs. Dogs make the world a better place. Even my cat likes dogs. But we have a good dog story about a story of a marriage that went south, and a good man lost a good friend in the process. We get the story from WMUR-TV out of Manchester, New Hampshire.
Jamie Carpentier always wondered what happened to his dog Ginger, but never thought he'd see her again. But when he read the description of a 13-year-old basset hound on the Humane Society for Greater Nashua's website, something clicked.
Just her paws. I remember her paws. That's the biggest thing about her I always noticed, was she always had these gigantic paws.
Carpentier had lost his dog 10 years ago during the breakup of his marriage. Unknown to him, Ginger was adopted from the Humane Society by an older couple who gave her a very good home. But when they were no longer able to care for her in October, they brought her back. Last month, Carpentier was looking for a new pet and gave the Humane Society a call.
Jamie says, look, I had a dog 10 years ago, and sounds like it might be her. It was the same name.
The name and markings matched up, so Carpentier decided to come for a visit. Within moments, Ginger licked his ear, and their bond was reconnected.
she just seemed like she knew it was me. She just walked around as me and my father that was there, and she just recognized us.
But just to see her back where she belonged with him, and to know that she was where she kind of started, she came full circle, was extra special.
Together again, Ginger and Carpentier know this time it's for good.
She's giving a little to me to the end, and I just want her to be happy, and live, a good dog life.
Dogs and their owners can create a special connection, some even, that are timeless. In Nashua, Andy Hirschberger, WMUR News 9.
See? Just goes to show you. What I've always said is true. There is nothing better than a dog. We are out of time. Join us in a week and we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.